Revolutionary War, and we can put it all together to better understand this poem. Okay, so our poem is The Midnight Ride of Paul Revere. We're going to start by reading the genre. We're going to choral read, starting with Ready? Everyone's finger on on page 256. Ready? A narrative poem
tells a story using traditional elements of poetry like rhyme, sound, patterns, meter, and imagery.
So, what's the difference between the story we're going to read today and a story like a Shel Silverstein story from this book that we always read? Think for 30 seconds. Think. What's the difference? Melvin, what's the difference?
That's fiction and this is non-fiction.
Yeah, this is a real story that happened. We know that because we studied the what war? The Revolutionary War. We know Paul Revere is a real person. His poems are silly poems that are just for fun. This is a poem that tells a real, true story. Okay? So, a narrative poem, that's what we learned. It tells a story using traditional elements of poetry like rhyme, sound pattern, meter, and imagery. Okay, so we can turn the page. Our focus question, which we already talked about a little bit, let's read it together, starting with why. Ready?
Why was this midnight ride so important?
So as we're reading the poem in the next couple of days and learning more about Paul Revere, we're going to ask ourselves that question. Why was this so important? Why is this something that is a famous story that people know? Okay? So, the Midnight Ride of Paul Revere. So these are our learning targets for today. We're going to start with choral reading the first target. I will. Ready, go.
I will use clarifying strategies to understand the narrative poem, The Midnight Ride of Paul Revere. I will stay on task
And will work well with my peers by being positive, encouraging, and doing my part. So during this lesson, these are our learning targets. This is what we want to do our whole lesson. So as fifth graders, you are responsible for meeting your learning target. Okay? So, clarifying. I want you to think for 30 seconds, what does it mean to clarify? If I told you, Froylan, will you clarify that for me? What does that mean? Okay, 30-second think. Turn to talk to your shoulder partners. B's talk first for 30 seconds. Go.
To explain something that specific.
Five, 4, 3, 2, 1. Katya.
To explain something specifically.
Oh, to get more specific. I love that word, specific. To get more information. Kimberly. To describe something. To understand. Yes, so we have clarified before. Here's a little background knowledge on clarifying. So we use our vocabulary. Yesterday we had a whole lesson on our vocabulary words. So every time you see a vocabulary word, what can you do? Clarify it by what? What resources could you use? Context clues, that's another one. But think, you have in your notebook the definition of every vocabulary word. So if you come to a vocabulary word, you can be a responsible fifth grader and go back and look at the definition, okay? So you can look at vocabulary. Context clues. Okay, think. This is something we've been doing a lot of. Turn to your shoulder partners. A's talk first. What does it mean to use context clues? How do we use context clues to help us? Go.
Okay.
You find a word and then find the word and
first
look what's
sentence.
around it.
And then you go
So you can try to get an idea of what it means.
understand it and keep looking around and see if you can find a definition.
5, 4, You use the words around it. I like that. Anyone else want to add? Paula.
Use the words around it to try to get an idea of what the word means.
Yes, good. Ezekiel.
Rereading the sentence.
Rereading, yes.
Use a dictionary.
You could use a dictionary. So context clues, you're looking for clues in your story. So yes, you reread the sentence, you look at the words that you know around the word that you don't know. So good, you guys know how to use context clues. You're pros at that. Prior knowledge is a big one with this section. Why would prior knowledge be good for this section about history? Katya.
Because you already know.
Yeah, you guys already, this is all the stuff up here, what you know about Paul Revere already. So this poem might be confusing. You might not know what a couple lines mean. But then we can go back to our prior knowledge or our prior knowledge up here. It doesn't all have to be written here. And we can figure out what the poem's talking about. So prior knowledge, we'll use a lot of that for clarifying today. And then questioning. Asking yourself questions. When you work in groups, asking your group questions. Okay? So these are the clarifying strategies that we're going to be using today. Okay, so let's look on page 259. What we're going to do is start with the first paragraph. I'm going to read it aloud, and then we are going to see what the meaning of that paragraph is. We're going to clarify what we have read, okay? So I want everyone's finger on listen on their book. You do not have to read with me. I will read, but I want you to follow along. So I'm waiting to see everyone's finger on the word listen. Following as I read. Listen, my children, and you shall hear of the midnight ride of Paul Revere. On the 18th of April in 75, hardly a man is now alive who remembers that famous day and year. So, that's kind of confusing, isn't it? The structure of a poem is a little more vague. It's not throwing the information at you. Okay? So, this is the paragraph we just read. What I underlined in red are things that I have prior knowledge on. So, Paul Revere. Give me a thumbs up if you know who Paul Revere is. Okay, so Paul Revere. 18th of April in 75. 18th of April in 75. I'm going to let everyone think of their prior knowledge. Think if we know of anything on April 18th in 75. Turn and talk to your shoulder partner. What was that?
I think he's 75 years old. But the day before the Revolutionary War. That's like 73 years old.
What happened on that day?
They got ready to battle?
They got
Okay. There was an event.
4, 3, 2, 1. Alberto.
Just talking about Paul Revere, because that's not when it happened. It's because he's really old.
Okay, so you think Paul Revere is 75 years old?
Oh, that's all I was. Oh, this is. The British were going to.
Okay, Nelvin, how did you know that April 19th, 1775? Look at our prior knowledge chart. And then let's use our context clues. So, Alberto, that was a good guess. In 75, maybe he's 75 years old. Look at our context clues. On the, meaning, what does that usually mean? A date. So you can't be an age on the. So, on the 18th of April in 75. So, it's written like this normally. April 19th, 1775. Which when we read was the battle that Paul Revere was warning everyone about. Yes. Yep, that was the day after. So the 18th was the midnight ride of Paul Revere. Okay? So, of the midnight ride of Paul Revere, what's our story called? The midnight ride of Paul Revere. Hardly a man is now alive who remembers that famous day and year. So we talked about how his midnight ride was really famous. Okay, so this is what I thought that this paragraph meant. It's the introduction to the poem. This poem is going to be about Paul Revere, and it took place in April 1775. This story is a famous story that most people know. So now let's go back. Read this silently to yourself, and then read that, and see if that clarifies the paragraph. Ready, go. So, in that paragraph, we used our prior knowledge of knowing about Paul Revere. We knew about his midnight ride, and we knew it took place in April 1775. Did this clarify what you read? Give me a thumbs up if you understand that paragraph now after we went through it. Clarified. Thumbs up?
Yeah.
Good. Okay, now we are going to do the second paragraph as a class. So I just did that one by myself. We're going to do the second paragraph as a class, okay? So, I will read it, and you will follow along with your finger. Everyone's finger is on key. He said to his friend, if the British march by land or sea from town to night, hang a lantern aloft in the belfry arch of the North Church Tower as a signal light. 1 if by land, and 2 if by sea. And I on the opposite shore will be, ready to ride and spread the alarm through every Middlesex village and farm, for the country folk to be up and to arm. Okay, so let's just do this sentence by sentence and really break it down. So the first sentence, he said to his friend, if the British march by land or sea from the town tonight. Do we know that? Let's all think. Look at the first sentence. What is he saying? He's talking to his friend, and he's saying, if the British march by land or sea from the town tonight. Think about our prior knowledge. Turn and talk to your shoulder partner.
Why don't you join that table? Just scoot the chair.
Five, 4, 3. Okay, what does that mean? If the British march by land or sea from the town tonight. What are they talking about? Why are they worried about the British? What's going on? Melvin? They're going to attack. So why are they talking about the British attack? What are they comparing? What are they thinking about? Okay. So, we do not know if the British are coming by land or by boat. So there's by sea or by land. Yeah, Nelvin, exactly. So let's go to the next sentence, starting with hang. Hang a lantern aloft in the belfry arch. Wait, aloft. What does aloft mean?
High in the air.
How'd you know that, Pablo?
From the vocabulary.
Oh, it's a vocabulary word. So now let's go back. So aloft means high. So high a lantern high in the belfry arch. Why are they hanging a lantern? I don't get it. Why are they hanging a lantern? Valeria.
Because that way they'll know if they're coming by land or sea.
Oh, it's a signal.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's go back to our prior knowledge. Oh, 1 lantern British by land, 2 lanterns if by the river. So he's saying, if they come by land, hang 1 lantern high on top of the church tower. If they come by sea, hang 2 lanterns. Wow, good job, guys. This is a lot of higher order thinking. You're doing awesome. Okay, so 1 if by land and 2 if by sea. And I on the opposite shore will be, ready to ride and spread the alarm. So what do those 2 sentences mean? Okay, so I want you to look at those 2